DC misconceptions. It's only natural for some things to get lost in translation if the majority of your knowledge pool comes from adaptations, the movies, television, and cartoons that you grew up with. Because the creatives themselves take the source material, put it into a blender, spin it up a little bit, get it all nice and mixed up, and then they create something new out of it. Sometimes for the benefit of the product, other times because they think they can do a better job. Or in the best case scenario, they just want to create something new that fans and new people coming in would enjoy. Unfortunately, there will be situations where some characters, franchises, or even the entirety of DC are given a bad hand, and that ends up shaping public perception. We all know this. At the end of the day, if the public marketing for a character isn't the greatest, everyone is going to look at them differently. And once people who are more interested in that space get into the fandom and start talking, you'll realize that there are different tiers of fans. The intermediate fan at the middle, the casual fan at the bottom, and the hardcore fan at the top. A lot of people sit within that intermediate phase, and because of that, they're thrown a bunch of opinions and takes that aren't necessarily true, but people assume that they are because they get thrown around a lot and absorbed through osmosis. And as a franchise, I believe DC is one of those things you have to grow up with. Through the cartoons, the DC animated universe, through there it becomes a part of you for most of your life. But if you don't read the comics, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce. So today, I want to go through some misconceptions that I see pop up very frequently and debunk them a little bit, or just go a little bit more in depth. And remember to subscribe, like, share the video with your friends, and post a comment if you so choose. It helps the channel out a ton, and we're making our final push to 50k. We're almost there, and I know we can make it happen. Anyways, guys, let's get back to it. Dick Grayson should not be the Batman successor. The first misconception here really stems from the Young Justice animated show. From what I've seen, for those first 2 seasons, it was huge. Cartoon Network, Netflix, everyone watched it growing up. It was kind of the standard for superhero animation in the 2010s. I enjoyed it a lot, even though it was somewhat derivative of the Young Justice comic, but at the same time, not a complete accurate adaptation. But despite that, they made something really special. Robin was one of my favorite characters, Dick Grayson, but in the show, we got those moments with Black Canary. Tell me if you know what I'm talking about, when she was acting like the team's trainer and guidance counselor. She's basically their outlet to debrief after traumatic situations. And during one of those moments, Robin realizes that he doesn't want to be Batman anymore.
The thing that drives him to sacrifice everything for the sake of his mission. That's not me. I don't want to be the Batman anymore.
In the beginning, this was his goal, to grow up and become Bruce. And it makes sense. Dick and Bruce are very similar. They have almost identical origins. Both of their parents died in tragic situations at the hands of a criminal. But what separates Dick Grayson is that Batman helped him get justice. He got closure. Something Bruce never had. So Dick doesn't have the same internal demon that's pushing him to sacrifice everything for Gotham. He wants a life. He wants to grow into his own man, away from Bruce and that shadow that Batman casts over everything. And Bruce himself doesn't even want that life for him. Bruce wants his proteges to be better than him. He understands who he is. He will never change, and he understands how unhealthy that is. In effect, he grew up too early. He was never really a kid, not for long anyways. Dick, though, because of Bruce, actually got to have a childhood. He got to joke around and be a bit lighter. That's what makes him different. Eventually, he grows into Nightwing, the middle ground between Batman and Robin, and to some people, an evolution, an ascension to both. Which is why some people get turned off when they see him become Batman. A lot of people bring up that Grayson has said multiple times he doesn't want to wear the suit, that it feels like a burden, that he deals with imposter syndrome. When he puts it on, he starts acting like Bruce, but the people around him don't respond the same way because he is not Bruce. They don't get in line, so he gets stuck in his own head. Is he really Batman? Does he even want that responsibility? Gotham is a full-time job. It's essentially cursed. Trying to handle that alone, or even with a team that you try to create, is overwhelming by yourself. But what people don't realize is that this is a part of his arc. They always see the beginning, but they never talk about the end. At first, yes, it looks like being Batman is regressing him, but eventually, he realizes he doesn't have to become Bruce. Alfred tells him to treat it like a role, like James Bond or Sherlock Holmes. Different versions, different interpretations have existed for years. What he has to do is make Batman his own. And that's exactly what Grayson does. He becomes more acrobatic, which of course fits his nature. He changes the suit, he made it less heavy, he removes more of the armor to be more flexible. He uses his eskrima sticks, he jokes, he smiles, but then he realizes something. If he acts like that in front of Gotham's criminals, they'll notice the difference, they'll think Batman is gone, and that this version here that's coming up doesn't care as much as the original did. So he adapts. He convinces them nothing has changed. He proves he has the strength and the intelligence to be Batman. And over time, he does find the balance. He can be himself within the role. That is the key. Being Batman doesn't erase who Dick Grayson is, it reveals it. Gotham doesn't turn you into something worse, it shows you the worst of humanity and forces you to decide who you are in response to it. And Grayson realizes he can be Batman without losing himself. That's why whenever Bruce needs somebody to fill in, it's always him. People still say he shouldn't be the successor, that it should be Terry McGinnis. I get it, I like him too, but Grayson is the logical pick. He has the most experience, the skill, the understanding of both Bruce and something beyond him, the mantle, and his run as Batman, even though it lasted 2 years in real life, it proved his worth. He had multiple ongoing titles, I think 4, strong reception, and a clear direction. It showed me he could have had that mantle and carried it for 5 to 10 more years easily. But then the second bomb strike, the New 52 reboot, and if that didn't reset everything, if Grayson had more time, he would have been the Batman to face the Court of Owls. Just think about that for a bit. That alone would have solidified him completely in the public eye. The New 52 itself was when more comic channels started to cover comics as well, so if Grayson was Batman during that time, I'm telling you the average person would have gotten on board more easily. At the end of the day, he just needed more time. The transition from Nightwing to Batman was the perfect cap to the post-crisis universe, at least Grayson's story. That's how it should have progressed, and honestly, that's probably where it should have stayed. Superman is boring. This is one of those takes that really grinds my gears because of how easy it is to debunk, but nobody wants to open their ears, superhearing style. If you ever look at the Superman-Spider-Man crossover that came out this year, you would understand that these characters are as similar as it gets, and everybody loves Spider-Man. In most continuities, the death of Jonathan Kent is one of the reasons that spurs him on to being Superman, similar to Uncle Ben. Both of them build their moral ethics from those losses. And honestly, let's stop right there. I want to branch this into a wider DC thing. The idea that DC are gods trying to be human, while Marvel is humans trying to be gods. That doesn't really make any sense. If you look at the Justice League, for example, you have Batman, Green Lantern, and the Flash. Those are humans, and Aquaman is half human and lived on the surface for most of his life. How could you even use this narrative in good faith? And Superman, the character that this applies to the most, is an allegory for the immigrant story. He didn't even know he was an alien. He thought he was human. He grew up on Earth. He's jokey, sarcastic, nervous at times. He was even a hero as a kid, as Superboy. Around the same time Spider-Man started his journey. He had to learn everything, his powers, how to keep them under control, how to hold back from lashing out. And the moment he finds out he's different, it creates that feeling of isolation. It's the same feeling that a lot of immigrants experience when they go to a new land, a new place for a better life, only to feel very much different from everybody else, like you never fit in. There's even stories where he sees people talk about aliens like they're monsters. Kill that alien, that's a random thing they might say, and it makes him feel separated, that feeling of standing out, of not belonging, of thinking nobody understands you. That is very real. But at the same time, he has guidance. It's just hard to always follow what you're told. It's easy to hear something, it's harder to base your life on it. And Clark goes through that. I think the reason why people think he's perfect is because he had time to mess up, years of growth. Even when he first appeared, people didn't trust him. How do you earn the trust of people seeing for the first time that a man could fly? And unlike a lot of other heroes, Superman feels way more deeply. He's kind of like an empath if you know anything about that in real life. He can literally see the souls of people through his supervision. So when somebody dies, it hurts him more than others. Where people see a corpse, for him, it looks worse, like all of their essence, their beauty was ripped away. At one point they were glowing, shining with life, but the moment they're dead, the only way I could describe it is if the world is in color and the dead body is in a black and white filter, but distorted, disfigured, almost like a disgusting patchwork. That also explains why he has that deep rage within him. If you feel that much, anger comes naturally too. He just has better barriers in place than other people to keep it in check, but there are a lot of moments, not even a little bit, a lot of moments where he crashes out, but at the very last second he reins himself in. I know, people think Superman is just a Boy Scout, and yes, morally, he is a paragon and he's better than most, but there are moments where he uses excessive force. Also, for the people in the back, he has a no-kill rule, explicitly. It's so ingrained in him that even when people take control of his body, he still can't do it. He physically won't kill. And that tells me that Superman's no-kill rule is so ironclad that it is comparable to Batman himself. Doomsday does not count. That one time with Zod, that was like 40-50 years ago, and we do not have to talk about it. And Darkseid, he's never tried, maybe he did, but Darkseid is Darkseid, he can never really die. Anyways, I also want to bring up that he thinks the same way we do. Like, if you were Superman, you'd be thinking, why not solve world hunger? Why not fix everything? He tries it too, and then he runs into politics, corruption, systems that don't actually want to solve problems. Because if Superman fixes anything, or everything, that removes money, power, and control. If he cures cancer, where's all that cancer research money going in? How are they gonna funnel that in? They can't. If Superman fixes world hunger, how are they gonna have all these relief efforts and services and have all this fundraising? How are they gonna fundraise for charity and get the money that they need for these things? Of course, they get a lot of money and they kind of pocket a lot of that away as well. They will literally be out of a lot of money if Superman is a complete charity case and helps everybody, so they make it worse. That's the reality he has to deal with, and it's a very interesting struggle for a character to have. But at his core, he's just Clark Kent. He went to school, he became a reporter, he got a girlfriend, he had to hide who he was for everyone's safety, and that made him more lonely because he couldn't fully be himself. Lois was one of the few people who saw him for who he really was. Even if she loved Superman first, she eventually loved the whole picture. Eventually, he got married, he had a son, he built a family, and then he became the inspiration, the Uncle Ben for an entire generation of heroes. The Legion of Superheroes themselves literally come from the future because of him. He is their inspiration years down the line in the 853rd century, and what they do is go back into the past to when Superman was Superboy at like 15-16 years old, and they help him through the legends of Superman in the future to become the man he was always meant to be, completing that loop of what Superman represents, hope for a greater tomorrow. He's one of the few superheroes whose story feels complete. He did everything he needed to do. Now, he's just living through the rest of it, going where life takes him, because at the end of the day, Superman is just as human as the rest of us. Barry Allen sucks and is inferior to Wally West. Now, me personally, I'm taking everything, every part of my being not to agree with this take, but if I'm being fair, it is not true. People like Barry Allen and people like Wally West, and like everything else, there are tiers to being a Flash fan. You've got the casuals, the ones who grew up with the TV show, who love Barry Allen with everything in them. In their hearts, Barry is the only Flash, and they'll trash every other version. Then there's the intermediate group. This is what I'm really talking about, the group that starts diving into that Flash mythos, learning about Wally West, him being the fastest, him creating the Speed Force, how he expanded it, all of that. And when you hear all of that, and then you look at modern adaptations where Barry is basically poaching Wally's personality and accomplishments, taking what makes Wally special, it becomes very easy to hate current Barry Allen. And honestly, current Barry has a lot of problems. I'm personally of the opinion he should have never been brought back. I'm also of the opinion he should have never created Flashpoint. Flashpoint was the nail in the coffin, not even just the reboot itself, but him being the one to cause it, and it leading to the complete and utter collapse of the Flash mythos. He wiped out 20 to 30 years of history just to reset everything to ground zero, and then rushed to build it back up again. And now look where we are. Barry hasn't even had his powers since like about mid-2024, and it's 2026. 2 years, no powers, no solo book since 2021. Meanwhile, Wally is the main Flash again. So yeah, current Barry is kinda, for lack of a better word, useless. Not only that though, I have to hammer it home again, his return actively damaged the mythos to the point where they needed patchwork writers to come in and fix it over multiple years. However, that is current Barry. If we go back to the original version, not the Jeff Johns rebirth version with the retcon of Reverse Flash killing his mom, but the original Barry Allen, that is a completely different conversation. This is the guy who, in the 1950s, helped pioneer the Silver Age of comics, bringing in a strong science fiction angle and redefining what superheroes could be. He took Jay Garrick, the concept of the Flash, a Golden Age hero from his childhood from comic books, and reinvented him. He became one of DC's most important legacy characters, helped spark the idea of the multiverse with Flash of Two Worlds, and laid the groundwork for concepts that people still talk about today, even outside of comics. Barry Allen was that guy. Now, if we were to compare base personalities, Wally West is basically DC's Spider-Man. He's impatient at times, stubborn, sarcastic, witty, very emotionally expressive. He connects with people easily. He's cocky. He knows who he is. He's instinct-driven, more likely to feel the Speed Force than calculate it, to go off of instinct. And that is what allowed him to master the Speed Force so quickly, to build his own Flash family, to create deeper relationships, and to have more dynamic interactions with his villains. Wally feels human in a very immediate emotional way. But Barry is in a different ballpark. He's more methodical, more analytical, a little corny, yeah, but intentionally so. He's a scientist, a detective. He approaches problems through logic, math, and process. He thinks things through step by step. Where Wally feels, Barry calculates, and that curiosity, that scientific mindset, that's what made him special. He didn't just use the Speed Force, he tried to understand it, break it down, map it out, push it to its limits. It makes perfect sense that the man who helped to introduce the multiverse would be the one to explore and chart it. Barry is the type of hero, literally, to try to diagram the DC multiverse so that other heroes could navigate it. And then you've got the Flash facts. I love these little corny science-based one-liners he drops mid-fight. Wally uses them sometimes as a homage, but that energy comes from Barry. Like this JLA moment. This is Wally, keep that in mind, but you know, let me just read it out for you. This is another one of those times I wish I could be more like Barry. He knew everything. Back when I was training as Kid Flash, he would pull out tidbits of useless information. He called them his Flash facts. Flash fact: relativistic effects take over as the body approaches light speed. Visual input will begin to blue shift and my body's mass will increase towards infinity. At these speeds, I'll appear to him as a continuous beam of light. I could hit him 1,000 times before he had a chance to blink. I only need to hit him once, breaking down physics mid-punch just to absolutely demolish him and send him across the planet, this little speedster Martian. That style didn't originate with Wally, it was just pushed further by him. And then there's one of the funniest traits Barry has. He is always late, which is insane because he is the fastest man alive. But it works because Barry takes on too much, he overcommits, he stretches himself thin, trying to do everything, and at times, his personal life suffers for it. That irony is a part of his character. Wally even jokes about it too when he became the Flash. There's never enough time in a day, is there? Which is hilarious coming from a speedster as he was looking towards the camera, but it hits harder when you realize that's literally Barry's life. And Barry also has been through things, the death of his wife, killing or, trying to kill Reverse Flash, going to trial for it, being one of the first heroes to cross that line and actually face consequences. If we want to simplify it even more, Wally is an extrovert, Barry is an introvert. Wally is emotion first, Barry is thought first. Wally expands, Barry defines, he made it first, Wally makes it better. And when written properly, there is absolutely room for both. Barry can be the more grounded, investigative Flash, or the multiversal explorer, the scientific mind. Wally can be the heart, the legacy, the emotional core, and the family man. If you had to pick one though, I get why people would choose Wally, but there's no real reason to pick sides. Both of them, when done right, are equally valid, and equally great, for completely different reasons. Hal Jordan is a boring character, overused, or the worst Green Lantern. I'm bundling all of these takes together because I've heard some variation of them throughout the years, and I just want to say, this could not be more untrue. A lot of people put Hal Jordan in the same boat as Barry Allen, where he should move over and let the next generation take over. Kyle Rayner is the best Green Lantern, John Stewart is the definitive Green Lantern. No! Even though Kyle Rayner is my second favorite Green Lantern, and he's been given a lot of fans through that death battle, and I will admit there are moments where he becomes my favorite, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, hand on the Bible, that Hal Jordan, both in-universe and outside of it, is the greatest of all time, the GOAT of the Green Lantern Corps. And the reason is because he represents everything that makes the Green Lantern mythos special. Not only is he viewed as the greatest Lantern ever, but he has some of the strongest willpower out of anyone in the Corps, if not the strongest. Actually, I'm putting disrespect on his name, the strongest willpower. He's basically his own willpower nexus at this point. Some of the craziest things he's accomplished have come from nothing but sheer determination and will. He uses the ring almost like a wishing ring, which is what it was intentionally made to be during the Silver Age, and just like Barry Allen, Hal Jordan was a legacy character who helped redefine a hero. He took over the Green Lantern mantle from Alan Scott and pushed it into a more science fiction direction, showing that superheroes could explore cosmic ideas instead of just following that traditional pulp formula. And while Hal might be a bum, unlike Peter Parker, most fans don't actually have a problem with it because, it does make sense. He's a Green Lantern, he spends months, sometimes years away from Earth. Of course his personal life is going to be a mess, he's going to come back, everything he owns is going to be gone, and he ends up back at his trailer drinking beer. That's a part of his charm. But Nate, that's not the biggest problem with his character. I know people are going to bring up the Orissa problem and her age and that whole controversy, but that has been retconned and isn't a defining part of his character. If it was, you can mention it all you like, but it's not. It was a creative decision, and I'm using creative very lightly here, from a specific writer that has not represented Hal Jordan since. But I get it though, flaws are inherent to a character, and what makes Hal interesting is that he isn't perfect. Not to that degree that you guys are throwing over there, but one thing that's really interesting that Hal deals with is the question. The Green Lantern Corps is built around overcoming fear, yes? We can all agree to that? Okay. So what happens when the worst possible thing happens to a Green Lantern? What happens when fear completely consumes them? Hal answers that question. He becomes Parallax. After losing everything, he becomes consumed by fear and takes a page out of his former mentor Sinestro's book. He believes that if he was to gain enough power, absolute power, he can fix everything. He can erase the mistakes, remove chaos, and rebuild the universe into something better. Of course, that leads him down a dark path. He fights heroes, he tries to do these things, but the most interesting part is that he becomes the very thing he spent his life fighting against. But eventually, he does break free, he understands his mistakes, and he overcomes that fear, making the ultimate sacrifice similar to Barry Allen. Now, he turns into a force beyond himself, becoming the Spirit of Vengeance, also known as the Spectre, where he explores some of the strangest and most abstract ideas a mainstream superhero has ever gone through. Did he just turn into a woman? And then that leads into Green Lantern Rebirth. This is where Hal Jordan's importance really becomes undeniable. His return under Jeff Johns created an entire second wave of Green Lantern popularity. It led to the animated series, the movie, and most importantly, one of the greatest runs in Green Lantern history. Jeff Johns turned Green Lantern into an A-tier franchise, S-tier at this point. At times, Green Lantern was competing with Batman in sales. Events like Sinestro Corps War and Blackest Night superseded Batman and made him one of DC's biggest properties. For a time, the entire DC universe revolved around Green Lantern, and that success didn't come at the cost of other characters. That's the biggest misconception. Hal Jordan didn't replace everyone, he elevated them and divvied them into different titles. The success of the main run created books like Green Lantern Corps, Emerald Knights, and much more, focusing on different Earth Green Lanterns that we all know and love. Then, going into the New 52, Green Lantern was one of the few franchises that continued through the reboot because of its popularity. Jeff was able to finish his story with Hal at the center, and it expanded even further. We had the main Green Lantern book, Green Lantern Corps with John Stewart and Guy Gardner, New Guardians with Kyle Rayner, a Sinestro book, Red Lanterns, and even Larfleeze. Hero books, villain books, bang, everything had a place. And the biggest contribution, other than the Bat family level of greed here for all these books, is the era of the emotional spectrum. That is what made, in my opinion, Green Lantern accessible. For example, you could explain Green Lantern to somebody who knows nothing about comics, and the moment you introduce different colors with different emotions and abilities, people understand it and want to know more. It becomes a power system. For manga fans especially, that's an easy thing to get invested in. The idea of different abilities, different factions, and different philosophies clashing against each other makes the Green Lantern mythos unique. And again, it didn't come at the expense of other lanterns. John Stewart, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, they all benefited. They all got major stories, nobody was thrown away. John Stewart might have been done a little bit dirty, but that's a discussion for another day that I actually talked about another day previously. I'm speaking gibberish, but I did speak about John and the problems with his character ever since Rebirth. But this era, what I love about it, going back to Hal, is that it lasted a long time. Even in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, it was Hal and friends, but John, Guy, and Kyle were all important. They became very iconically known as the Four Corpsmen. And that era even created new lanterns like Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz, who went on to have their own successful stories and an ongoing duo run that ran concurrently with the main Green Lantern title. This right here is why Hal Jordan is the greatest Green Lantern. Not because he erased everyone else like Barry Allen, but because he created a platform where everyone else could shine. Everybody got their moment. And from a success standpoint, a creativity, a mythological, and even a quality standpoint, Hal Jordan was the start of it all. The go of the Green Lanterns, of the entire Lantern spectrum, Hal Jordan sits at the very top. Michael Jordan, LeBron James levels of greatness. Nobody can take that away from him, and I honestly enjoyed his period coming back from the dead as the main Green Lantern, the most out of every single Lantern I've ever read, with Kyle Rayner being a bit up there as well, if not the same at times, depending on my mood. But yeah, guys, let me know down below, what are some of the biggest DC misconceptions that you hate? Leave it down in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care. Deuces. Peace.